Hello and welcome to another Denis Wick Products interview where I get to know Matthew Hartnett. So, welcome, Matthew, to this interview. And so, were there any jazz idols that you sort of think, oh yeah, I'd like to play one of them charts that they play, or I'd like to play like them? You know, the whether it's Irby Green, J.J. Johnson, any of those guys.
Man, so oddly enough, learning jazz for me, I did not have any trombone player in sight. I didn't even know about any of those guys until maybe close to my senior year. So like freshman year, sophomore year, I had my peers around me, and these guys were coming from HSPPA. They were coming from like Cashmere High School, like these jazz programs that like have produced like the Crusaders, the Jazz Crusaders. They produced the Robert Glaspers. They produced, all the now famous jazz guys. And so like these guys had pretty much basically already went to college for jazz. Like really just playing like and I was all over the horn. So I my ear always I could pick up whatever was going on. And but they wouldn't let me like join in like as far as like combo. They'd be like, hey man, like you just sit here and learn, or you can go upstairs, get out, go practice. And so, I took my instructor, Howard Harris gave me the Kind of Blue record by Miles Davis. So I learned how to play jazz from listening to other instruments, which is why I think I get a little upset with myself because I don't play all the trombone stuff on trombone, like like those sequences that you can play on trombone that most trombone players learn from like JJ and from Curtis Fuller and stuff like that. But I didn't have those guys like in my ears coming up. I had Miles, I had Roy Hargrove in my ear. I had my peers, Andre Grant and Marion OJ Ross in my ear. I got my first professional gig when I was a sophomore. And after that, like it was just that's how I just learned by rote. Like I literally learned that way. And our style of learning was more of that approach because our professor was from New Orleans. So it was more of like kind of play like don't play anything that you can't sing. So it wasn't like a jazz by numbers kind of approach. Like hey, learn like we learned this the scale, you learn the bebop scales, the blues scales, and stuff like that. But there weren't like we didn't have the what is that book that everyone plays everything from? What's the method book?
Oh,
The,
like the Arbon or Otto
yeah,
Lange or yeah.
yeah, We there was none of that. I didn't even know what that was until I left and went to the new school in New York, and was like, oh, because everyone's playing these exercises basically while they're soloing, and I had never really heard people play like that, and because it's just the style is just different, in Houston. So like all the bebop turnarounds, 2/5s, and all that kind of stuff. People were learning this stuff in school, and I wasn't learning like oh minor 2/5 bebop lines or licks, and you played through all of these scales and exercises. I didn't get any of that. So
Right.
my style of playing is being it coming from listening to. I was a huge fan of Soul Live too. So I listened to a lot of them, a lot of Eric Krasno solos. So things I was playing was like not trombone stuff. Even to this day, I still don't. I listen to like even like my students that I've taught, and of course I put them on to trombone players to listen to early on, and I hear some of the stuff they're playing. I'm like, man, that's dope. Like, but like I would never play it though. Like I wouldn't even approach the horn that way. Like it's So I
Oh,
think
I mean
TFP is transformative.
that's great. I mean, and it's great that then there's a uniqueness in what you do as a result of that. I think it's like you can put yourself into something, and you're not necessarily having all these influences going on either. It's just you. I think we, as a trombone player, you can sometimes confine yourself by saying, well, that's what trombone players do. But if you hear a saxophone or a trumpet or whatever it is doing something, oh yeah, you just do it. You just get on with it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I definitely think I didn't have. Well, now I don't have the because I mean my thing, like my thing is like horn section work, and so there's no line that like a saxophone player or a trumpet player can give because they, the instruments are very different. So, but there's nothing that they can do that I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable for me because of just how I'm used to maneuvering on the instrument. Because I learned from them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
as far as like lines and stuff are concerned, like nothing really challenges. Well, not it is challenging, but like oh man, there was a gig. I did my first gig with Mike Phillips, in New York once. It was for like a big shoe release for Carmelo Anthony, Team Jordan and all that stuff. And so we get to the gig. I got the music prepared. Everything's great. The horn section is me, Keon Harrell, my boy Cameron Johnson, and Camille Thurman. And so, like, we're like, learning the music. And so Mike's like, hey, y'all didn't get this thing right here. And I was like, what are you talking about? Then he starts playing it, of course, and he goes, and I was like, what the hell? And so I'm looking at Keon like, bro, like, what, do you have this somewhere? Like, and he was like, yeah, man, Greg Boyer wrote it out somewhere. And so I'm looking at this thing that Greg Boyer wrote out, and I'm like, this is a million notes. I was like, bro, just play it, man. Just let me hear it, like slow. So he starts playing it. And so I'm learning this thing maybe hours before the show. And what this thing was the Chick Corea solo to Gotta Match.
Right.
And I was like, what? Like, what horn player plays Chick Corea, period? Let alone transcribes a Chick Corea solo, but not just himself, but the entire horn section. And I damn sure played it.
Good.
I got
Excellent.
that done. It was like the gauntlet was down. I was like, I'm going to do this. So yeah, man, a few hours learn that Chick Corea solo.
Oh, it's always tricky stuff. No, that's fabulous. And that takes me on nicely to the next question, which is how do the products that you use, whether it be the make of trombone, whether it be the mouthpiece, the mutes that you use, how do they affect your ability to improve as a player?
I mean, it does tremendously. Actually, I started out on an old instrument, so my first trombone was like from like the '60s. It was a Bach. It was really well broken in, very open, large bore, and so that's what I kind of started on. So, everything after that to me had to have that same feel. Like anytime I played on a small bore or like a dual horn, it felt really tight. And I hated that feeling. So I always like to get like, older horns or whatever. And so my 60 Bach was stolen. I definitely could not afford a new trombone. I had the question. So I started looking at like old like pawn shops and stuff like that. And I went to I want to I don't know if I remember if it was a pawn shop or an old instrument shop, but this trombone was like hanging in the window like decoration. It had black tape kind of spiraled down the bell. And I was just like, wow, they did that to the trombone. But I went into the store looking at the instruments, tried all the trombones, didn't like any of them. And I was like, how about that one in the window? And they were like, that's just decoration. And I was like, let me see it. Played on it. And I was just like, first of all, when I played it, when I blew into it, stuff came out the bell. But like it felt good and it sounded great. And so this horn, I don't think they even knew what they had because I bought the horn for like $400. Um, and they cleaned it for me and all that kind of stuff and took all that tape and crap off of it. And the horn, later on, I found out years later, decades later, I guess, I found out that horn is like super rare. It's like the first of the trigger models made by H.N. White, the King Cleveland. And so like I think my brass guy in Houston, he looked up the serial number and he was like, hey man, this horn is old. He was like, it's so old that like the metal, like that I was saying like the slide was very light on it. and he was like, the metal is like thinning, and like the slide is a little bit warped because of just the age of the horn. And so I was like, man, so I'm playing on it, and it does have like a little bit of a different sound after a while. Like by the spit valve, there's like a little hole down there, and just so like how I played on, and I enjoyed I'm a really dark, warm sound, because coming from being a classical guy, like as a trombone player, I wanted to sound like a French horn. I love that. It was such a compliment to me when people walked in the room and they're like, "Oh man, I thought a French horn was in here." I was like, "Oh no, it's me." Like, yeah, yeah, it's me. But so it gave me that dark sound, big 9.5-inch bell. This everything was big. I played a four AL, Dennis Wick. I've been playing a Dennis Wick mouthpiece actually since I was in seventh grade.
Right.
So on that four AL, because that's what my trombone teacher had. I wanted to have everything just like him. So I played on that 4AL, super huge mouthpiece, super big horn setup, and that was cool for all the stuff that I was doing. And then when I got to New York, by the time I got to New York, and I was just working a lot of section stuff, one of my mentor was like, "Hey man, like you got to change your sound or the way you approach playing the horn from like horn section stuff to solo stuff." He's like, "Because horn section you need like a more punchy, crisp sound. Your solo stuff you can do all that dark, sexy stuff all you want." But like section stuff got to sound like this. So I started changing the way I blew air, and started thinking about blowing like more cold air because I taught band and stuff like that, so I knew about like cold air versus warm air with like woodwinds and stuff. And I was like, let me try and blow cold air and see if that changes my sound. And it did, and I did everything I could to brighten up my sound, but the entire setup was so dark. So when I met Mary, one of the first things I was telling her, I was like, hey, I want to like trying to experiment with like a little bit of a brighter sound. I started to do like working on a solo project, and I'm like, I kind of got to be able to cut through because that mid range on the trombone, like it sits in such like a sweet spot of mid range, wise it'll get completely washed out by every instrument around it, sonically. So I'm playing my instrument, and I can be moving on the instrument, but you can't really necessarily hear it or distinguish it from anything else around it. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So when I was looking at all these other guys, like Trombone Shorty played on the smaller setup. Um, who else? Wyclef plays a super small setup when he's like soloing and stuff. And I was just like, man, like these guys are playing on pea shooters. I was like, when you grow up in like classical world, they like kind of like it teach you pea shooters are bad or like beneath. It's like a. So I had my whole way of thinking was just different, and I was just like, all these jazz guys that are playing on pea shooters, they're playing on smaller setups, like especially the Latin guys, man, they play on super small setups, and but they're cutting through. They're cutting through. I didn't like their particular sound, but I understand to like if you want to like actually do this thing on a solo thing or you want to be heard, you're gonna have to make us get a smaller setup. So I had Mary send me out some different mouthpieces and experimenting with those. And I mean, and then I think the Heritage one, I don't know if it came out or maybe I just randomly discovered it, and I was like, hey, I want to try that. And so, and it felt like the happy medium between the dark, warm sound that I wanted and like the being able to cut through thing. So, yeah, the setup, the mouthpiece and the horn, and I've gotten a new horn since then. All that stuff affects my playing big time. Like if my right now the slide that I play on, if it's not greased right, it does not even want to work at all. Like when you like freshly grease it and all that kind of stuff, it works like heaven. But it's really heavy as opposed to the old one that's really light. So like that literally affects my mobility. Like when I listen to myself play, I can tell if my slide was locking up on me or not because how I play will sound like and then if it's like grease, it'll be more legato, it'll be a little more smooth. And I'm actually more able to get around on the horn better. So like that, I've really been working on that lately because I need to be consistently like good, not have these moments where I'm like not good, and then I was like, oh, I need to get my slides together, So
Yeah. Oh no, that's fascinating. Thank you very much. And then finally, uh, do you think it was the people that you were growing up with playing, or the teachers, or recordings, or a bit of everything that inspired you to then improve in those younger days?
um, when I was very young, it was all just competition. I gotta be the best, gotta stay the best. No one's gonna be better than me. And I met people who were better than me, and I was like, no, you're not better than me. I'm better than you, and I'm gonna prove it. Like it was just that. It was just really just competitiveness. And then when I got to college, it was really like my peers around me because they introduced me to the life that I didn't even know that it existed of being a professional musician. I didn't even know that was a thing. That was a actual career path. I was like, what? You mean y'all gonna pay me $100 to come play like these notes, play my instrument? What? It was crazy. So that changed my life, and I learned on the bandstand from those guys around me. So I think after that, it was like a little bit of everything. It was my professor. It was the guys around me. It was listening to the RH Factor. It was listening to Soul Live in Baltimore. It was listening to just all of that stuff, all of that cool stuff that was coming out that really resonated with me. I didn't really listen to like a lot of swing stuff because it didn't resonate with me like that. I grew up listening to classic R&B, soul, screw, a lot of rap, hip hop stuff. So the music that really spoke to me was more like the jam band stuff, or like the Roy Hargrove stuff and stuff like that. And I wanted to sound like that. I'm like, that's the music I want to play. So that stuff heavily influenced me. I mean, even to right now, because at one point, no one really could pick it up. Well, but once I said it to a friend of mine, I said, "Hey, man, all I'm doing is Roy on trombone. Like I'm not doing anything else. I'm just doing Roy isms on trombone." And he was like, "Man, that is what you be doing." And I was like, "Yeah, that is it." So yeah, that stuff highly influenced me. It should have been JJ. It should have been Curtis. It should have been like Wayne Henderson. Even though those guys did influence me, but it was much much later, and the
Yeah.
influence was not as heavy as the other stuff that got me at the earlier stages.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time out to share that with us. And I hope it's not too long before we get to meet up again and have a chat.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely, it was fun.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Brett.